G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to be talking about the rather contentious topic of the B1 Centauro. Now, a lot of people have been talking about it, discussing how it's perhaps problematic, you could say. Now, it is rather strong, and I'll get to that in a moment, but we're going to have a look at this gameplay, and I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things to you. So first of all, I'd like to say that the B1 Centauro, in my opinion, shouldn't be 7.7. I would personally prefer it to be moved up to 8.0. Now at 8.0, it'll see slightly less favorable matchmaking, and it will also see vehicles such as the XM1. Now I wouldn't put it up to 8.3 because there it'll be able to fight the some stuff like the T64, and without a decent selection of ammo, basically, to fight the T64A, the B1 Centauro will practically be useless. And in a small and new tree, you really want most of your vehicles to be useful, or at least good. Now, one of the things with the B1 Centauro is on sandy maps and snowy maps, for example, it is particularly slow. And the one thing that the B1 Centauro has mainly going for it, apart from its gun, is its speed. The B1 Centauro is able to top out at 120 kilometers per hour. And one of the things that hampers it is soft terrain. Now, this is one of the, I guess, balancing factors that goes into the B1 Centauro when considering its matchmaking. The fact that it is actually extremely map dependent tends to weigh in as to how good or bad the tank is. A prime example of this is the mouse. The mouse is extremely bad on large maps because it just can't traverse the terrain and can't be effective. But on maps like Advance to the Rhine in a group of two, where you're sort of working with each other, it is extremely effective. And the same goes with the Centauro, just in reverse. The Centauro is extremely fast, has pretty much zero armor, although we'll get to that in a minute. But it takes advantage of its good speed to get into positions. And you can see, while I got on the road, I was able to top out a little bit faster, and I can go and engage this T54. Now, HeatFS says no, and I get a nice shot there, but doesn't do much, and I survive one. Now, this brings us to an interesting topic. The survivability of the B1 Centauro is actually pretty surprising. I honestly didn't think I would survive that shot. I was expecting to be oofed pretty quickly, and by the contrary, I survived. Now, note one of the things that I did. I backed the tank up and swung the side around, so I was facing side on, and that means that some APHE shells won't be able to do any damage. They'll just go straight through. Now, this is an interesting factor playing into the B1 Centauro, meaning that if you're facing stuff like Russians and those sort of Tiger 2s and Tiger 105s, Jagdtiger, Mouse, it is actually extremely difficult to face. But one of the things that it is extremely good at facing are Object 906s and IFVs. Now, the IFVs, it seems to be, this thing seems to be sort of an anti-IFV vehicle predominantly, because it wields HeatFS, which hull breaks. It is quick. It has just enough armor to mitigate some shells. Obviously, can't withstand ATGMs, but that's another thing. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that me in the B1 Centauro, I'm able to take positions that sort of surprise the enemy. And one of the things that the B1 Centauro is fantastic at doing is surprising the enemy. And this is just a typical trait of all light tanks. Tanks like the RU-251, especially when they were introduced, tended to have this sort of feature. I like that dodge on that ATGM. That was pretty fast and pretty nice. And I've come in and surprised this chieftain. Now, I'm assuming that he had his breech taken out or something like that because he isn't able to fire back. But in the case where they are able to fire back, you'll see right in this situation here. I come across a shot call delay. And one of the things that I mess up on the shot call is I shoot the driver only. Now, I'm using I'm trying to use my mobility to get around him. But it turns out that I'm actually not really sort of surviving this. I just managed to nick a shot because he's firing dart, and if he was firing HeatFS or Hesh, I would have been able to I wouldn't have been able to survive that. But I got really lucky there. Now, the B1 Centauro also has the issue of terrible turret traverse. It traverses at about the same rate as your average tier 3 tank, which is pretty poor for rank 5, especially high rank 5. So, it's not exactly amazing. And as soon as it faces enemies that can traverse their turret extremely well, such as the Leopard 1, the XM1, and other vehicles in that region, it tends to sort of start to struggle in close-up engagements. So you really don't want to take your Centauro into close engagements. But at the same time, on a small map like Sinai, you don't really have a choice. Now, once again, I'm in a forward position. I'm surprising the enemy, and this is just one of the things that you tend to do in a Centauro. And in any lighter, fast-moving tank. You tend to sort of get up in those positions and surprise tanks that aren't really looking, aren't really paying attention. And this is one of the things that kind of frustrates people a lot. And I can understand why the Centauro is so frustrating to fight against, because you've got this sort of combination of, I guess, stabilizer, good speed, good survivability. You saw me just take an ATGM to the face again. But one of the things that the Centauro is surprisingly weak against is IFVs as well. It can counter IFVs, but the IFVs tend to pretty much destroy it pretty quickly. Mainly because they're wielding Heat FS. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about the main gun, I'm talking about the ATGM. And ATGM seem to be perfect at countering the Centauro. Simply because they have that, one, the rate of fire, especially if they get on the side, and they have the ATGM. Plus they have the scouting feature. And you can see there I take another shot, another ATGM to the face. So I thought I was going to end it there, but obviously not. Now, I am told that the Centauro's crew is apparently too far spaced apart, and if that's true, then I would indeed like to see that fixed, but for now, what we've got is what we have to deal with until we get a bug fix. But for the most part, you can see that in general in this match, I'm sort of being a bit aggressive. I'm using my knowledge of the map. I'm getting a little bit lucky. You can see that I'm taking shots in weird spots. And people haven't quite figured out how to fight the Centauro yet. A bit like the RU-251. And I found the RU-251 an absolute menace at first. Because I was always up against RU-251s in my Carnarvon and my Centurion. And they would always be behind me somehow. But give it a couple of weeks and the meta will sort itself out. And the Centauros will sort of learn how they play. And you will eventually learn how to play against the Centauro. My personal recommendation just for now is to sort of look around. Always look around, especially on big maps. And big maps tend to be the killer for a lot of people. Personally, I don't like big maps because they allow people to sort of just get behind you and, you know, shoot from nowhere, which frustrates me personally, especially if I'm playing some heavy tanks or something like that. But it allows tanks like the Centauro to pretty much run wild. I prefer, personally, sort of medium-sized maps, a bit like Mozdok, I guess, where you've got medium flanking routes, you've got some places to surprise the enemy, but not massive amounts, like, for example, Wallonia. And I did play a match on Wallonia, and I came across two mouse tanks, and I ammo-racked them both from 1.5 kilometers away. One of them saw me, and he missed. And there goes a 20-second reload. And that's the issue. You have very, very map-dependent tanks. And by a balance of the map size, you can pretty much balance out the tanks nicely that way. Whereas if you have either massive maps or tiny maps, you're only benefiting really one type of tank. And that is either the medium tank or the super heavy tank or the sort of lighter tank destroyer and the light tanks, obviously. So having these deviations between absolutely massive and absolutely tiny don't really help the game out at all. Honestly, I would much prefer to see maps that are a sort of medium size, like about the size of Mozdok. I think Sinai in its design is fine, simply because there are plenty of things for every vehicle class to do. There are actual sniping spots, there are flanking routes, there are brawling routes, there are everything, you name it. There is a role for every single vehicle on Sinai, and that's why I like the map. It's really, really well designed. But the other maps don't seem to be that well designed, and it really tends to show with a vehicle like the B1 Centauro that can sort of go everywhere and abuse everything. And it tends to be pretty frustrating for people that are trying to, spade out their tanks, unstock them, something like that. And I understand that, but at the moment, assuming that all the information on the B1 Centauro is correct, as in the crew placement and the ammo rack detonation rates and whatever, I think personally that a battle rating increase of 0.3 should be about fine. Just simply because I don't believe that any L7 with a stabilizer should sit at battle rating 7.7. I think anything with an L7 should be battle rating 7.7 minimum, provided that it has heat FS. So, for example, the Vickers and the Centurion, because they didn't use heat FS or dart rounds, shouldn't be at such a battle rating, and they're rightly so positioned, in my opinion. But anything with a stabilized L7 should be, without a shred of doubt, 8.0 or above. That goes for the STB1, and that goes for the B1 Centauro. As soon as you get to a higher battle rating where you're using APF SDS, then I think the tank should be 8.3 or 8.7, and tanks like the Leopard A101 and the Type 74 are quite well positioned in terms of their battle rating. Now, for vehicles that are of, for example, a higher battle rating with ERA and, for example, let's take the Brennus for an example. The tank doesn't have a stabilizer, the tank has good dart rounds and has ERA, which means it's somewhat effective. If it had a stabilizer, it would be a decent 9.0, but it doesn't have a stabilizer, and so it sits at 8.7, and I think somewhat rightly so. It doesn't really help it, but, you get the point. So, overall, I don't think the Centauro is, terribly broken OP, but I do think it could do with a battle rating increase, and that could really benefit everyone else in the tech tree. Not only that, we could also fix a couple of battle ratings around that regarding the L7 stabilized. Now, I want everyone to, I guess, leave your opinions in the comments section, because maybe I'm wrong, and I'd like to know why. And please do be, I guess, patient and polite. But until then, take care, and I'll catch you next time. If you guys made it to the end of the video, please type Centauro is not OP and should be at battle rating 3.7. See you guys.